welcome to another edition of From the Pressbox with Wade Neely. I'm your host, Pulaski Citizen Sports Editor, Wade Neely. So glad to be with you guys here today. Welcome in. It is the Thursday, November 9th edition of the program. And wow, we have a fun show on tap for you guys today. Be ready, folks. We get a little off the rails. We tap in to the sometimes mysterious mind of our good friend. He's former Pulaski Citizen Sports Editor. He is IT officer at the Bank of Frank Ewing, one of our fine sponsors of Pulaski Citizen Live, by the way. And he's a man of many talents. He's one of our play-by-play voices on Pulaski Citizen Live. He's a staff writer. He's a good friend. He's a colleague. He's our very own Mark Mize. Mark sits down with us, 15-plus good minutes of conversation with Mark. We talk about the Richland baseball alumni game. We talk about the Richland Bridgeforth basketball games that he covered earlier in the week. We get his thoughts on where Giles County sits after week one of the TSSAA 3A state playoffs. And we close it out with a big fist bump, both of us going 16-0 in Fearless Forecasters just a couple of weeks ago. I'm still trailing him. So whether he knows it or not, maybe I kind of tried to get into his head a little bit, maybe inflate his ego and see if I can't catch him in the final few weeks of the regular season. Let's go ahead and dive right in, folks. Busy week for us here at the Pulaski Citizen as we did kick off those TSSAA state playoffs we just talked about. Mark will break it down a little further, but what I can tell you, 34-0, Giles County knocks off visiting Chattanooga Brainerd. A dominant performance from Giles County defensively and a pretty sharp performance on the offensive end as they led 23-0 at halftime, 24-0 at halftime, I stand corrected. And then they add some points there and they win it 34-0. You had 3 touchdowns for running back and receiver Kamari Turner. He caught a 29-yard touchdown. Then he had 2 short rushes. Great night for him all around. You had a rushing touchdown for Johnny Jackson, and you also had 2 field goals from Chase Carden. But you had 100 yards on the ground from Exorion Randolph. So Giles County's offense played really well. Jackson did have an interception, but other than that, about as flawless of a performance as you could have offensively for Giles County. And, you know, the question becomes, where do they go from here? And they obviously go to round 2 of the playoffs. They get McMinn Central coming in to the Brickyard on Friday. But big picture, you know, where do they go? What's the ceiling for this team? And that's a really good question because the offense seems to be clicking. They've kind of reached a point where we're a couple rounds away maybe from a team being able to stop the Bobcat offense so much as Giles County kind of getting in its own way, if that makes sense. I mentioned the interception by Jackson. That was kind of an underthrown ball intended for Pearson Collier, and not a great effort there from your QB. That's a mistake you want to obviously clean up, and Johnny Jackson's a great quarterback, so you know that he's certainly capable of doing that. The other big thing was penalties, and a few plays where they just didn't quite execute maybe as well as they could or should have. But penalties were a real killer last week for Giles County. Didn't come back to haunt them by any means. They were able to overcome those on a number of drives, but you just can't get behind the chains. Chris Bledsoe talks about it a lot during our broadcast on Friday night on Pulaski Citizen Live. Against the good teams, you're not going to be able to convert those 2nd and 15s, those 3rd and 18s, situations like that. So Giles County's got to shore those up. On the other side, the defense played well. Wow, they are flying to the football. Caleb Oates is playing like a man possessed after moving from linebackers to defensive line. Kind of weird to think about, but an injury to Jesse Murray a couple weeks ago is what now has Oates playing in a new position, but he's playing his best football the entire season. So he's been fun to watch. Ja'Kiah Inglet had a sack and an interception. Amari Smith kind of feels like they're just kind of turning the full throttle up for Amari on both sides of the ball. We know he's an all-state performer on the offensive line. He got a Mr. Football vote from me for Class 3A. That's how good I think Amari is as an offensive lineman. But now on defense, he's been playing a lot of defense all year, but it seems like they're really just turning the wolves loose, so to speak, when they're playing Kamari Turner, they're playing Kareem Bryant, they're playing X Randolph, and they're playing Smith. A lot of those guys, they're really not holding anything back on defense. They're going best 11, as it were. So good performance. 2 good field goals there from Chase Carton as well. He missed a 59-yarder, which is crazy to think about, but he did miss it. And we said it on air last Friday. Good to see him make 2 good field goals now to try and maybe get some of that confidence back because who knows when you're going to need 3 points in the postseason where every possession is so critical. Again, we'll break down the final little bit of that toward the end of our show today. But that was the big news. Other big news is basketball season has gotten off to a fast start. We are off and running in Pulaski Citizen Live. We had not 1 but 2 broadcasts for you guys on Monday night. Mark and Jennifer were at the Bridgeforth Richland game, and I was down in Minor Hill as Minor Hill took on Elkton. So our 4 schools all got it on Monday night, and we had a lot of fun bringing you guys middle school basketball. Kind of a tune-up, really, for us as far as our broadcast coverage, Pulaski Citizen Live in the the basketball season. So, high school cranks up next week. I feel pretty confident. We're going to have a guest next week to talk a little round ball. So stay tuned for that. Not going to reveal just who that might be just yet, but rest assured, we're going to have somebody join us next week. Other bit of business. This show is coming out on a Thursday. We're recording on Wednesday, later recording this week, and it's kind of a good thing in a sense. Bad news for UT Southern, but it's good that we're able to sneak this in here. The UT Southern women's soccer team was just upset in their Southern States Athletic Conference semifinal match. Game goes to overtime, and they fall 1-0 to Life University. So that's the bad news for the Firehawks. The good news is they're 14-4-2. They are going to still go to the national tournament. They're most likely, all but assured, going to host the national tournament opening round, which will be next week. And then if they win 2 games there, it'll be back to Orange Beach and heading back to the final site for the national championship, which is the hopeful ultimate goal there. UT Southern men and women's basketball has been off and running. College basketball at large has been off and running. I got my Michigan gear on. They just got a nice win versus, you may be thinking I'm paying homage to the football team in their big game versus Penn State this weekend. And that might be accurate, but really we want to give a shout out to my boy Juwan Howard and the Wolverines. They got the good win versus UNC Asheville because ask Michigan State and ask Vanderbilt. Some of these early season games are a little tricky as Michigan State gets upset at home by James Madison, and then Vanderbilt goes out and loses to Presbyterian at home. So I got to show some love to the Maize and Blue. But that's all for our opening segment. We're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, Mark Mize, former sports editor here at the Pulaski Citizen, one of our play-by-play voices for Pulaski Citizen Live. We got a great conversation with him. So sit tight, folks. Mark and I sit down and chop it up on the other side of this timeout. You're watching From the Press Box with Wade Neely, and we are back right after this.
He shoots, and he scores!
All right, folks, welcome back in. Another segment here on From the Press Box with Wade Neely, and we are just going to dive right in. It's our special guest. This is a long-awaited, highly anticipated segment with our good friend Mark Mize, former sports editor and a longtime contributor and friend of ours here at the Pulaski Citizen. Mark, how you doing, my man?
I've been doing super well. You know, it's been a lot of fun covering football for Pulaski Citizen Live, and now we get a chance to, obviously, see the postseason for Giles County football, but getting ready to turn it to some basketball as well. So it's been a lot of fun.
And, you know, you and I have been talking about trying to get you to come on this show for a while. And I said, I would love to do it every single week, but I really want to cash in and get max value. And I wanted to bring you on today because we got a number of things that you personally have helped cover for the Citizen in the last couple of weeks. And so we'll kind of dive into that. But also, we don't want to peak too early. We didn't want to have you on the very first show and, have our viewership decline after that. So we appreciate you taking some time, and we definitely want to dive right in. One thing just right off the jump that I think was very intriguing, and then you did a great job of covering for us at the Pulaski Citizen. You can still read all this stuff at PulaskiCitizen.com. What can you tell us about the big event a couple Fridays ago, the Richland Baseball Alumni Game? That was a fun thing, I think, from the jump, and it seems like good times were had.
Well, really, just hats off to Coach Sack and also Coach Hughes. I think they did a great job. The former coach and the current coach just putting something together that was fun for everyone. Kelly Bratton, of course, was your PA announcer, and so he made it pretty fun, kind of set the tone for the evening, but really was very impressed by, I guess, the elder statesman, you might call it, of Richland baseball, who, I kind of thought, when you think of alumni sports, you usually are thinking of people who were probably 30 or older, people who've been out of it a little while. Of course, they allowed, because technically they met the definition, they allowed 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to play.
Right.
So I kind of initially thought, pitching-wise, if you haven't pitched in the last 3 years, you're probably going to struggle. But the best pitcher of the night was Nathan Dunovit. He was a graduate of 2013. I'll be honest, I think he still would probably be one of the top 3 pitchers on the current high school team. Did a great job, picked up the win. And then the 2 big bats of the night were Harley Schrader, who I think was a class of 97, if I'm not mistaken, and then also Adam Brummett, who I believe was class of maybe 2000. And so, those are a couple guys who are 40 plus, and still, can hit the long ball. It was really impressive.
That is crazy, and I love the way you, and if you haven't read it, I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but I loved your lead there when you said, Harley Schrader went 3 for 4, with blah, 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 and had his stats, and you said, this is a confusing headline maybe, or it's not a headline from 1997, it's a headline from the Richland Alumni Baseball Game. Those guys were really getting after it seems like, and I love the mixture of, like you said, the recent alumni taking on the elder statesmen, as you call them.
Definitely. And, whenever you looked at some of the young guys like, Jay Sterryberry, Sam Edwards, Houston Cheek, and Erlon Duran, Aiken Walder, and, some of the guys who we've been covering the last 3 years, I really thought that they would be the most dominant members of the night. And for the record, a couple of them had really good nights. But like I said, I think that this was a perfect situation in which you had some young guys who played pretty well, but it really kind of was all about those senior members of the not senior citizen, of course, but senior members of the Raider alumni who really, really put on a show. Also, have to give a shout out to Tim Dickey. Of course, we know him as Bobo, who was the manager / player, wanted to be called Pete Rose for the night. And he didn't hit like Pete Rose, but I'll tell you, he managed a great game.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason they won is because, they, felt like they were a little bit cooler, a little bit more collected and calm. And I think that he was really keeping his team in it in terms of keeping perspective. So I think that honestly, he was actually probably one of the MVPs for their team without really putting on a huge performance on the field.
Were there alumni umpires as well, or how was it? Was it call your own balls and strikes? How'd that go?
So there was only one umpire for the night, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, never mind. I think there might have been 2. But I'll tell you, the home plate umpire was Zach Bailey.
Okay.
And so, when I saw him there, I was like, wait.
An enforcer.
Well, I was like, he was a really good baseball player too. And for a second, I thought, I was like, what's he doing out here? Because he was a really good baseball player, but if I'm not mistaken, for Giles County.
Right.
And so I was wondering, I was like, is he going to play? Because, he's a staff member now at the school, so it kind of makes sense. But no, he was actually there to be the home plate umpire. And he called a great game. There really wasn't much argument at all, in terms of arguing balls or strikes or anything, mainly because a lot of guys were, just swinging and missing pretty badly. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun, and I really hope they continue to do it. I heard that between the silent auction, of course, the gate, and then the concessions as well, they made over $4,000 for the program.
Good.
And just a great night of fun. I had a lot of fun. It was probably one of the most fun events I've covered in quite a while. And so I hope that everyone else had as much fun as I did, and I think they did.
Yeah, and we were stoked that you agreed to go out and cover that for us. And like you said, everybody had a great time. And I guess the big takeaway is, yes, potentially raised quite a bit of money, but also seems like an event like that just kind of is things that you see quality programs kind of do, and that buyback within the program. So it seems like, by and large, a smashing success.
Yeah, and when you think about Richland, you say what kind of sports school they are, because you have basketball schools, you have baseball schools. I wouldn't necessarily say they're a baseball school, because obviously the basketball program has just been such a rich tradition. But they've had so much success in the diamond sports too. They've got a couple state championships in softball. They've had quite a few state tournament teams in baseball too. And so, while I think a lot of people think of Richland as a basketball school, they have a really, really rich tradition in the diamond sports. And it's really great to see them kind of embrace that and bring that back around. And honestly, they've been pretty good since I've been covering too.
Yeah.
Now, they haven't been back to the state tournament since I've been around.
Close several
baseball
times, though.
But yes, very close several times. Of course, one of the times was because they ran to a Vanderbilt pitcher for East Robertson. And so, they've gotten a little unlucky, but really good program. And I think that night kind of showed the fact that they got a lot of momentum. And I think that they still, I think even after Coach Troy Hughes had such a great run, of course, he was taken to the state tournament back whenever I was in high school. I think they're going to continue that. I don't think that it's going to be a case where it was really because Hughes was such a special coach, which honestly he was. But I think that, great new coaching staff, a lot of momentum, and I think they're doing things the right way.
Good. I love to hear that. Thank you again for covering that. While we got you on Richland on the Mind, you and Jennifer Hawkins were inside Dwight Clark Gymnasium on Monday night in a game that was broadcast on Pulaski Citizen Live. Our first basketball broadcast of the year. We had middle school action as Bridgeforth came up to Linville. What were your takeaways from Monday night as Richland wins both the boys and girls contests?
Well, the funny thing was the final score of both games was 33-20. And so, you may read the newspaper this week and say, well, is there some kind of typo there? But yeah, that was actually the final score from both games. From the girls game, Richland's a really dominant squad. I really think that Bridgeforth did such a great job in the second quarter of getting back into it and really frustrating them. Because, defensively, Bridgeforth was really good. And I'll tell you, Mariah Holt and Brea Smith are really, really talented guards. I mean, just great ball handlers. They do so many things well. Knifing through the defense, a pretty good Richland defense. Richland, by the way, versus Christ Life Academy gave up 0 points this year versus Wayne County gave up 2.
Wow.
And so this was a team that came in, was really shutting people down.
Yeah.
Bridgeforth put up 20 points and played good defense against them. But at the end of the day, Danny Lynn Galloway and Kate Kirk are two of the most dominant posts in middle school girls basketball that I can remember having seen. They've got some really good guard play to complement them, but really it's kind of just a give and go between the two of them. And defensively on the other side of the court, I mean, that is an imposing force to have to go through. Richland girls are really, really going to go far this year in middle school, as far as middle school does go, of course.
Yeah.
And then for Bridgeforth was really impressed. I think they have they came in undefeated. Both teams were undefeated going into that game. But I think they have a lot of good basketball ahead of them. Turning the page to the boys' game, I was a little surprised, to be honest with you. Coming into the night, I don't usually predict games before, obviously, for reasons that, we don't like to do that with the newspaper. But would have initially guessed that Bridgeforth was probably going to win that one. Richland, is still trying to find who's going to be their primary ball handler and, how they're going to do some things at guard because they're a very young team. They really don't have a lot of returning starting experience at all. I think they only have a couple of players who really played much at all last year for middle school. But came away from it really impressed by Richland. And I think, though, if you play it again, especially if they play it again at Bridgeforth, I think you might see a different outcome because I think Bridgeforth's press really, they got in some early foul trouble. The way the referees were calling the game, they called a fair game for both teams, but they called it a close game.
Yeah.
And if one team is trying to be really physical and trying to press, obviously that doesn't feed well into your game plan whenever the refs are calling a close game. And so the refs called the game, which once again was fair for both sides, but was probably in Richland's favor in terms of what they were trying to do with the basketball in the night. And just can't say enough about, I think Colin Johnson had a really great game. Was really impressed with him at guard. Was really impressed by all the guards. Of course, player of the night was Gavin Schrader. He had 19 points, a double-double, had several assists. He really is just, they've had 3 straight really good posts come through middle school. When I'm thinking of, obviously Gage Kirk, who now is actually, about to be a senior, on the high school squad. And then, of course, oh my goodness, now I'm embarrassed. Cade McCormick, there we go.
Yep.
Cade McCormick was incredible. And now Gavin Schrader, they've really had an embarrassment of riches in post play in recent years. And so I was really impressed with him. I think he's the reason that they kind of were able to win that game because I think he kind of changed Bridgeforth's half-court offense. And defensively, Richland in the half-court was probably one of the best performances I think you'll ever see. But all that to say, Bridgeforth is so athletic. They press really well whenever they're kind of allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
They do some things really, really well, and I think they kind of had an off shooting night. So I think if you play that game back, I think it's definitely closer. I'm not going to say necessarily who wins or not,
Right.
but I will say that I haven't seen the schedule to see if they play again at Bridgeforth, but I kind of hope they do.
Yeah.
Because if they do, I really think that that's one that's definitely worth your time to come out to, because I really think you're going to see a better performance from Bridgeforth. And, overall, I think it was a really fun night of basketball. Richland swept, but on the girls' side, Bridgeforth played very well, has a lot to, be proud of. And on the boys' side, I think if you play that game again, Bridgeforth's got a real chance to win it.
Yeah, we had a big night of middle school action, and like you said, two games, same score. Lot to be excited about for both of those programs. We also did Elkton and Minor Hill. Yours truly had the call down there on the south end, so it was fun for us. We normally don't cover a ton of middle school games, but it was fun to see, especially kind of our first broadcast of the basketball season, which we'll have much more on in next week's episode, kind of a preview as high school gets cranked up. But that was exciting to hear. Two other quick things I got to ask you about before we get you out of here. You were on the sidelines last Friday night shooting photography for us. Giles County got a 34-0 win versus Brainerd. What did you see that either you liked or maybe were surprised by from Giles County in that game?
Well, I will say I was very pleasantly surprised by the defense. I don't know if this is the same defensive unit that you saw early in the season. Granted, early in the season, some of those games you're playing some pretty hard opponents.
Right.
But they even had a couple games that I think were letdown games versus some lesser opponents where, especially in the first half, they didn't run away from a couple teams the way that I think a lot of people probably had anticipated they would. Defensively, I think it was probably one of the best games I've seen Giles County play in the last 3 years. Really impressed with how this unit has improved over time. Really kind of knew what we were going to get with the offense, obviously.
Yeah.
Any offense that has, both Turner and Randolph, and then obviously now Jackson has all these different things that he can do. The receiving core has a couple guys who can go out there and catch the ball, and the line's been playing really well. I knew what the offense had in store, but defensively really, really impressed. And really they almost, you've seen them so much more than me, but they have a very business-like approach. The other night, you don't see them celebrating real big or anything. They're kind of just down to business. They know they were supposed to win that game. They know they had to win that game, of course, because every game in football postseason is an elimination game. And so they just came out and took care of business, and the defense looked great.
We'll keep tabs on them as we get into round two. They get set to host McMinn Central on Friday, which should be an interesting game. They average a lot of points on the offensive side, so you're right, that defense will have a chance maybe versus an improved offense to have a test. Finally, we get you out of here, Mark. You didn't come in strutting as much as I did the other day, but you and I, man, we got a little celebratory kudos. I kid you not, about 4 weeks ago in this very same citizen office, I asked Scott Stewart and asked Carrie Jane Malone, I said, has anybody on the panel gone undefeated in a while? Just a casual question. And then they said, not that we can really recall. We'd have to dig, but nothing jumps out. And then merely 2 weeks later, you and I both go undefeated. You're sitting there in first place. I'm kind of toward the back of the pack. I just simply got to ask you, what do you got going on right now? Because you are picking at a decent clip. And obviously, like you said, you and I both go undefeated 2 weeks ago.
Well, I think this is maybe the 11th year I've done this, and I think this is only the second time I've ever gone undefeated. So, obviously it's pretty rare, even whenever you're performing pretty well. People always ask, how do I pick my games? And usually what I do is this. I actually go through and immediately, first draft, I just pick exactly what I think off the top of my head. And then, of course, I check that versus the analytics, and then I check that versus Vegas. I usually try to pick about 3 to 4 upsets every week because, of course, if you never pick upsets, you're really not going to be set apart from the pack.
Yep.
And so, at the end of the day, me and you and Carrie could pick the Vegas favorites every single week and, do super, super well, but we would all finish in a tie for first place.
Yeah.
And so, you want to usually go with the favorites more often than not because there's a reason. Vegas, there's a reason they're making money. They know what
they're building skyscrapers and casinos all the time out there.
Exactly. But to that point, like I said, I want to pick favorites about 12 times each week, and I want 3 to 4 upsets, and that kind of makes the difference. And so that's really how I look at it. I mean, I don't know how you look at it. Obviously, since we have been doing this together, I had won 6 out of the past 7 years before you showed up, and now you and Daniel Haney have kind of handed it to me a couple times.
Wow.
And so y'all have put together some pretty impressive runs. So I may need to be asking you for advice, but that's usually how I think about it. And it's fun to go undefeated, but at the end of the day, it's a close race this year. Me, you, and Carrie are really the top 3 right now. I'm really interested to see how it's going to turn out. If I'm not mistaken, and y'all will have to check the archives, I believe I'm one away from, if I win this year, tying the all-time record for most wins. I think that's with Herschel Lake, if I'm not mistaken. But I think he either had 7 or 8. I think he had 7, and this would be my 7th Fearless win if I won this year. So I'm looking toward that, trying to set the record.
Oh, I gotta get my picks a little better then to see if we can keep Herschel atop. We will check on that. And I'm like you. I usually will go with Vegas first, and then kind of, I guess, in reverse of what you just said. I'll have Vegas first, and then I'll go back and say, do I see something, maybe a chance? And one that was big last week was Clemson over Notre Dame.
Very impressive call on your part.
Not a fan of Clemson or Notre Dame, but I just thought maybe playing at home, they're not as bad as maybe their record may indicate. A chance to go for that. Real quickly, we are contractually obligated to ask you about a game this week. Missouri and Tennessee. You're a noted Missouri fan. You picked Tennessee, though. That game is going to be a nail-biter, at least according to the experts. So I'm curious your just quick take before we get you out of here.
Well, really, Missouri's played pretty well at home this year. My concern is this. Obviously, they had 2 weeks to prepare for Georgia, played a good game versus Georgia, but had a couple turnovers. Georgia didn't turn over the ball, so obviously that was the difference in that one. They're now mathematically eliminated from, winning the SEC East and going to the SEC Championship. Tennessee's not. And so I'm kind of worried that with Tennessee having some momentum, kind of seeing that there's a little blood in the water. I know Georgia's undefeated. I don't think Georgia's as good as they were the last couple of years. So I think Tennessee kind of sees that, hey, if we win the next couple and they lose to Ole Miss, then suddenly you're talking about potentially Tennessee going to
winner
Atlanta.
Take all on that.
And so, the reason that I picked Tennessee is because I think Tennessee has more to play for, and I think they're playing up. Whereas I'm worried that Missouri, they put it all out there. They were going, obviously, for a chance to even potentially get into the playoffs if they could beat Georgia and continue that momentum. And I think that they kind of left it all on the field versus Georgia, played a great game, and I'm worried that they're going to have that letdown week. Hopefully, since they're at home, they won't. But, I'm a little concerned, and that's why I went ahead and went with the Vols.
It's going to be a fun Saturday of college football. Mark, thank you so much for your time as always, and we will get you on the show again very, very soon. Appreciate all that you do for us at the Pulaski Citizen.
As always.
Mark Mize, former sports editor of the Pulaski Citizen. You can hear him and Jennifer Hawkins for the vast majority of your Richland Raider broadcast as high school hoops tips off next week, and Mark and Jennifer will handle those games and many, many more odds and ends for us here at the Pulaski Citizen. We're going to take a quick timeout. When we come back, a closing segment here on From the Press Box. We'll be back right after this.
Thomas Drugs, serving our community since the early 1900s. We're a full-service drugstore and soda fountain located in a building on Main Street that is on the National Register of Historic Places. We have a staff of pharmacists with over 70 years of experience, and we are committed to offering the best care and service to our community. We're now offering healthcare testing and treatment with positive results, a one-stop shop. Stop by our pharmacy today or visit our website at thomasdrugs.net.
We are back here inside the Pulaski Citizen headquarters on the gorgeous downtown historic Pulaski Square. And so glad to be with you guys. Wade Neely here, sports editor of the Pulaski Citizen. You're watching From the Press Box with Wade Neely. And let's dive right in. We've got a brief matter of time here before we got to wrap this thing up. But I want to let you guys know it's the tale of the tape. After going undefeated a couple weeks ago, Mark and I both finished 13-3 in Fearless Forecasters this week. Had the nice call, though, a little extra strut, like I said, with Mark in our previous segment there, as I picked Notre Dame to go into Clemson and not win, but to lose. And Coach Dabo Swinney and the Tigers take care of business. Helped me out a little bit there. So we shall see what this week unfolds for us. Lynn Garrett is our special guest this week. Sydney Teague was last week's winner. And it's going to be a fun week here as I'm predicting. Buckle up, folks. Give me Georgia over Ole Miss. Man, I hope this is a close game. I really kind of have a sneaking suspicion that Georgia's kind of going to pull away from it. Not as much of like Mark said, not necessarily overall impressed with Georgia. They've kind of gone through the motions at times this year. But I just don't know what to expect out of Ole Miss in a big game. I know Jackson Dart's playing at an extremely high level, so that'll be a fun game. But give me Georgia in that one. Other big games. Man, we got some good ones this weekend, folks. Give me Washington at home versus Utah. You guys know I love Utah. I've been banging the drum for them all year. But I think Washington playing at home is going to get the win. Give me Oregon versus USC, who looks like they're in a little bit of a free fall. Hard-fought game last week for USC, but give me Oregon coming up this week. It's the rivalry game that you didn't know that you loved until just now, but it's UNC and Duke this weekend. Everybody in the panel is picking North Carolina, so give me them. I'm the only member of our panel that's given Missouri a shot to beat Tennessee, and it's not because I'm a Tennessee hater, and it's not because I really am a Missouri lover. I just had a feeling that everybody on the panel was going to pick Tennessee this week, and there's only one way for me to move up, and that's if I got to make a game up somewhere. And so I thought that Tennessee would get picked across the board. They did, so I went with Missouri. I think that's going to be a close game. This is wild to say, but I think it'll be a fun game. I don't think Tennessee-Missouri fun game words have ever been mentioned in the same sentence together, but here we are. It's been kind of a wild year thus far. Give me Arkansas over Auburn. Give me Arkansas over Auburn as we get toward the end of this here. I'm getting off the rails. Give me South Carolina by a lot versus Vanderbilt. Give me Texas A&M at home to Mississippi State. In a game that, man, this brings me back to a lot of great memories of my youth, but give me Florida State big over Miami. I think that'll be a big-time win for Coach Norvell and the Seminoles this weekend. Give me Michigan. The Wolverines get it done. A lot of stuff swirling around on the internet and in the news about Michigan and Coach Harbaugh and his involvement with everything that's going on. But I think Michigan finds a way to shove all the distractions to the side. I think they're a lot better team than Penn State. The question is, can they come out and execute like that better team? And if they can, I think they win kind of big. But if they don't come out and execute well, Penn State is still a very good football team. This is the biggest test of the season. It's the first real test for Michigan. Their season's coming down to a 2-game schedule, 3 games essentially if you count Maryland. But Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State, that's going to determine how they do. But I'm taking my Wolverines this weekend. Give me Iowa State on the road at BYU. I love that Scott Stewart keeps putting BYU in these every single week because they're a weird team. They're hard to figure out. They've got some nice wins this year, but they've also got some bad losses, and they vary week to week. As we get into the pros, give me the Bengals over the Texans, which is a game kind of like Tennessee-Missouri. I was not anticipating saying would be a fun or entertaining game at the start of the season, but here we are. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, they look like they are flying high right now. Give me the Titans over the Buccaneers, as it is going to be Levis versus Baker. That'll be a fun game with two quarterbacks that kind of play similar, both just try and go out there and just make plays. And so we'll see what happens, as that could be a sneaky, entertaining game, even though it may not be the most aesthetically pleasing game. Give me my beloved New York Jets over the Raiders, but woof, not much else needs to be said about that. And to close it out, give me the Steelers over the Packers. Shout out to my Uncle Tony Orr. That's your free Steelers pick, and maybe your only free Steelers pick that you're going to get from me. But that's Fearless Forecasters, folks. That's our show. Remember, folks, Giles County is at home this Friday night. If for some reason you are not going to be in attendance at Sam Davis Park, come on down. I should say come on down to Sam Davis Park, but if for some reason you're not going to be there, make plans to join us. You can hear us on Pulaski Citizen Live each and every single Friday night. It's yours truly and Chris Bledsoe. 2 ways to get us. You can download the Mixler app on your phone, and you can search PCLGCHS, or you can visit PulaskiCitizen.com. Click on that Pulaski Citizen Live button, and you can tune in that way. That's all the time we've got. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another edition of From the Press Box with Wade Neely. We will see you next week. Enjoy your football games, and most importantly, folks, enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next time.